St. Thomas University Journalism and the New Brunswick Beacon present The Basement Files.
Hello and welcome to the Canada Votes 2015 edition of The Basement Files. I'm Nathan DeLong.
I'm Ben Krause.
And I'm Fernanda Damiani. Here are your top stories.
Coming up, could new ID requirements affect voter turnout?
Justin Trudeau makes a visit to STU campus.
And learn how a single mom balances family and politics.
As the federal election draws near, many people are struggling to find the right identification to vote. But student leaders are saying not to worry. Finding the right ID is easier than you think. Maggie McLean has more.
After the introduction of the Fair Elections Act last year, many of the changes to the election process are coming into play this year. For students living away from home on a university campus, this can mean the struggle of finding the correct identification to vote with. Rachel Slip is a part of the Get Out the Vote campaign, which is designed to encourage youth to vote. According to her, the process isn't as complicated as some people seem to think.
So students that live outside of Fredericton and want to vote in the Fredericton riding must have some kind of confirmation of residence form. So for students that live off campus, that can include a lease. It has to have their name on it, so it can include a lease, a power bill, something of that sort. And the students that live on campus have to have a confirmation of residence form signed by the residence manager with their name and their room number and address, like I do, because I live on STU campus residence.
Along with a piece of ID with the home address, voters can bring anything from a student ID to a library card. Anything that proves they are who they say they are. For out-of-province students like Dylan Lloyd, finding an ID with the correct address on it can be a challenge.
Some of the requirements, they're pretty easy. I'll say that. They make it as easy as possible for some students, but there is certain aspects to it that I found difficult when I tried to register online. When they, like ID requirements, stuff like that, like I know I don't have a driver's license in Nova Scotia, so I have just an ID card for Nova Scotia, but when I went online, there's only certain provinces they accept IDs from, so that kind of made it challenging to register online.
This year, students living in residence are being given proof of residence forms signed by the head of residence life to prove they live in Fredericton. This allows them to easily vote in this riding. Students are also able to vote in their home riding, either at the student polling stations or by mail. Despite any confusion felt over ID requirements, Elections Canada is trying its best to make the process as smooth as possible. For STU Journalism, I'm Maggie McLean.
Students aren't the only ones having ID problems. Several First Nations people aren't even sure if they'll be able to vote in the upcoming election because of identification issues. Xavier Barbell reports.
Members of St. Mary's First Nation are feeling under the gun as Election Day draws near due to new voter ID changes. The changes are due to the Fair Elections Act, which states that voter ID must be government-issued and state the voter's address. St. Mary's First Nation councillor Alan Polches Jr. says some First Nation voters may be confused on Election Day when their ID won't be accepted.
You can get a letter of confirmation of residency and take that down, but if your First Nation is not registered, then that's not going to count.
With the election campaign well underway, parties have taken shots at the Conservative government for the Fair Elections Act, even going as far as to say that it intentionally disenfranchises groups unlikely to vote for the Conservatives.
To actually come out and vote. He's been very honest and open about it. He doesn't want people from groups who tend not to vote for him to actually come out and vote.
Anthony Peter Paul, a First Nation student at St. Thomas University, thinks the changes aren't needed and just add more barriers for voters.
ID to vote, but now they have to use a secondary form of ID, which makes things a lot more difficult because a lot of First Nations people don't have second forms of ID.
Polches says he's doing everything he can to make sure First Nations people in his community can vote this election.
We are going to have a community barbecue to invite people to come down to make sure they're registered. I'll go right online and see if they're registered. If they're not registered, then we will register them.
Anthony Peter Paul says he's still skeptical of the new voting requirements, but hopes people get out there and vote anyway.
It is going to make it difficult for the First Nations vote to get out there.
In case you're wondering what type of ID is acceptable, you can always check at elections.ca. For the New Brunswick Beacon, I'm David Bardwell.
St. Thomas University students are signing a pledge to cast their ballot for this election. The reason is to make their voices heard and possibly win $50. Mitchell Pendron has more.
Get Out the Vote is a national campaign created by the Canadian Alliance of Students Association. The campaign is driven towards students that are eligible to vote. Sean McCullum is a fourth-year student and Get Out the Vote's coordinator for the St. Thomas University Students' Union. He believes he can be the driving force into changing the student vote demographic into a larger turnout.
The campaign is targeted at students, and the whole idea is get out the vote. So focusing on education through active programming and events to actually get people and young people interested in voting and the electoral system, actually getting them out to vote. There's a big thing where students don't think that their voice actually matters, but it really does, because when you have 60% of the, or 40% of the country saying my vote doesn't count, that's a huge percentile not actually getting their voices heard.
Jeff Fino is a second-year student at St. Thomas University and is voting in his first federal election. He has also signed Get Out the Vote's pledge.
I signed the pledge because I was told that it would be, it shows that students are voting, and that's good. So if we need help down the road, we could take that to a politician and they will help us out.
The Get Out to Vote campaign is running right up to the election on October 19th. Students that sign the pledge are empowered to get their voices heard. They are also entered into a draw to win one of 4 $50 prepaid visas. For St. Thomas Journalism, I'm Mitchell Pearden.
The Conservative Party promises to make students' lives easier by providing tax relief on scholarships, bursaries, and textbooks for Canadian students. Stephen Harper promises to work with First Nation partners and provinces to improve educational outcomes and help them to receive a post-secondary education. The party also wants to assure that international students who graduated from Canadian universities stay in Canada as a permanent residence.
Every party has pulled out all the stops as this historically long election campaign wraps up. The Green Party in Fredericton is no stranger to going over the top. Natalie Sturgeon reports.
Got to make a better choice, vote with your heart no matter what they say. Strategic voting just ain't right now. Finally seen the light and breathe.
The Green Party, an underdog in the upcoming election, hit more than 20,000 doors and attended several events this campaign in an effort to change the minds of voters.
I think if I were to think about things that we do probably differently from other parties, there's a big educational component to the Green campaign in terms of the content of the platform and why these things are important. We are not a big traditional party, and so there are some stereotypes out there about the Green Party.
Door-to-door, tuition rallies, public information meetings, seniors' home visits, and gatherings of many Green supporters were common elements in this campaign. Social media was a key piece to the Green campaign. Fredericton Greens used a promotional campaign called What I Heard Today. Babineau says she has a categorized list from every community that she's been to this year. St. Thomas University has its own Young Greens chapter. Adam Mahoney is the president of that society.
Huge voter turnout. The Green Party really wants to push students and young people to get out and vote, because it really is a fundamental part of our democracy. The Greens are looking to just get a few seats in Parliament so they can have a voice of reason and work with the other parties to make Canada better.
Babineau says that the Green Party has a complete vision that other parties just don't have. A part of that vision is the promise to abolish tuition by the year 2020, something the Liberals say cannot be done. The Green Party has printed several flyers and have made several appearances on campus reassuring students of their promises. They say the youth vote is key to this election, even though the Conservatives have changed the Election Act, which makes it harder for youth to vote. Babineau says that oftentimes students don't think their vote will matter, and so they decide not to. So, she says, campus involvement is important to show students every vote matters.
There are so many very powerful visuals that are available on social media, speaking of social media, that shows how that percentage of the vote, if they were engaged, that they could change the outcome of the entire election.
With just a few days left of the campaign, the Fredericton Greens are emphasizing the importance of voting. The polls are open October 19th. For Stu Journalism, I'm Natalie Sturgeon.
Justin Trudeau paid a visit to the Stu campus last week. The federal Liberal leader didn't take any questions from reporters, but he did take plenty of selfies.
We can't afford another
Trudeau was well received by the hundreds of people in James Dunn Hall who heard him speak. He was introduced by Fredericton Liberal candidate Matt DeCourcy. DeCourcy helped rally the troops before Trudeau spoke. The Liberals are projected to win the Fredericton seat, which has been held by the Conservatives since 2008. But the race in the urban riding has been growing tighter. Trudeau stressed the importance of students voting, even if they don't want to vote Liberal. He said it's how Canada's young people can be heard.
Low student voter turnout has been an issue in past elections. This year, students may find it even more difficult to cast their ballot. Cody Peters reports.
The St. Thomas students will have to go off campus to vote this year in the federal election. Megan Thompson is the student union president at STU. She said the student union was made aware that STU wouldn't have any polling stations over the summer during a meeting with the Canadian Alliance for Students Association.
Our immediate reaction was complete and utter frustration. We thought that STU did an excellent job at showing that they could have an incredible voter turnout during the provincial election. As you know, we did have an on-campus polling station last year for the provincial election, and STU students voted in a much higher proportion than those on the UNB campus.
Thompson said even before the student union was approached by students expressing their displeasure, they were lobbying to get a poll at the STU campus. Despite their efforts, they received a firm no from the Elections Canada. The closest Election Canada polling stations will be set up in the UNB Student Union Building's atrium and the atrium on the MBCC Fredericton campus. UNB and MBCC are the only campuses in New Brunswick to have polling stations at their locations. Dr. Tom Bateman is a political science professor at STU.
Polls on campus are a fairly new thing in Canadian electoral politics. We, I think as a result, don't know exactly how effective they are in stimulating the youth vote. We'll need a lot more time, and there are also other factors in play that make it difficult to say that this particular decision by Elections Canada has made a difference in voter turnout.
However, Bateman says common sense suggests campus polls would make it easier for students to vote, therefore increasing youth voter turnout. Students that have moved away from their home ridings will still be able to vote. They'll have to go to their local returning office in order to cast a special ballot. Students can also take advantage of advanced polling over the Thanksgiving break. For STU Journalism, I'm Cody Peters.
Marie-Lou Babineau is challenging the stereotype of traditional politicians. The Green Party candidate is running for a federal election as a mom with a full-time job. Maria Burgos has more information.
The first time Marie-Lou Babineau ran as candidate for the federal elections, she was a full-time teacher at St. Thomas University, and her daughter Naomi was 6 months. Growing up with a hardworking mother taught Babineau how strong and accomplished women can be. So 7 years later, with her mother as her inspiration, she decided to run again for the Green Party. Michael Babineau is the candidate's campaign manager as well as his older brother.
She really holds true to a hardworking person and somebody that believes in family values and believes in community and support. She's been on multiple boards of directors here in the city. She's been president of the union. I mean, she's always taking on more to help the community.
Okay, and first position? Okay, and how about when you stand on one foot?
Yeah, I'm good.
Do you put your foot up like this sometimes?
Babineau accepts the campaign can be a disruption to her child's life, but she knows this power of example will benefit her daughter in the end.
It's much more powerful when you are a living example of what it is to be out in a leadership position, to be a public figure, to be speaking up for people. It's much more powerful that my daughter see her mother doing that.
Babineau believes it's a good thing for children to be part of the political process. It's the perfect way for them to learn that even mothers can do it. The most rewarding thing of the campaign for her is the positive impact that she's having on her daughter. It's what she will remember the most. For STU Journalism, this is Maria Burgos.
The NDP has made several promises in their platform. When it comes to students, they promised to eliminate the interest on federal student loans over the next 7 years, if elected. They've also pledged $250 million towards the Canada Student Grants program. This program makes it easier for members of low-income families to go to university.
A St. Thomas alumni who has always loved politics is running for the federal Liberals in Fredericton. Matt DeCourcy wants to give back to young people because he was one not long ago. Kennedy Bowden Welsh reports.
Growing up, Matt DeCourcy knew from a very young age he wanted to do politics.
In politics since I was 10 years old. I can remember the 1993 election where Jean Chrétien became Prime Minister. Following that intently in the newspapers, watching on election night, and also taking note of Andy Scott, who was elected as the Member of Parliament here in Fredericton in 1993.
Being a St. Thomas graduate himself, the university not only holds a special place in his heart as his school, but as the tipping point for an incredible opportunity to work with someone he looked up to.
I was invited to participate as a volunteer with Andy Scott, who at the time had been in office for about 8 or 9 years. And so I helped out with different activities with Andy, got involved with the Paul Martin leadership back in 2002, 2003, and then got very involved with the New Brunswick Young Liberal Association. After I graduated from St. Thomas in 2005, that summer I moved up to Ottawa to work with Andy, and I spent 2 years working as an assistant to Andy, and then as an assistant to Todd Russell, who is the Member of Parliament from Labrador, working in their Parliament Hill offices.
The Liberal candidate for the Fredericton riding, DeCourcy is ready to give back to young people what he can.
In addition to that, we know, especially in this community, how tough it can be for students to access the post-secondary education system, to be able to afford to go to school, to get through school and then come out with a debt that is crushing on them. And so in our policy, and in our platform, we've laid out a realistic but very progressive opportunity.
Also part of the Liberal platform are mental health issues. With studies showing that over 20% of Canadians will experience mental health, Matt DeCourcy and the Liberals are taking a stand.
Child and youth advocate on a national transformational approach to the way that young people access mental health services within the community, and I think that those sorts of community wraparound supports, clinical supports, medical supports, and also just having friends and family understand that the mental health challenges are something that need to be dealt with in a compassionate and empathetic and understanding way is very important. So we'll build upon those sorts of approaches that allow a person to say, okay, I have a mental health challenge, that's okay. I know that my community will be there to support me, and I know the government will be there to help direct me to the proper resource where I can get the help I need, and I don't have to feel bad about that.
With 35% of the vote, Matt's hoping for a Liberal future. For St. Thomas Journalism, I'm Kennedy Baden-Welch.
That's our show for this week. Thank you for watching.
Be sure to visit mbbeacon.ca for more Student Journalism news.
From everyone at New Brunswick Beacon, thanks for watching.